There's a graveyard none of us talk about. It's not filled with bodies, it's filled with ideas, dreams, and potential that never made it past the planning stage. Every single day, thousands of people wake up knowing exactly what they need to do, and every single night, they go to bed having done none of it. This isn't laziness. This isn't lack of knowledge. This is something much more subtle, much more deadly. And as we stand at the threshold of 2026, the question isn't whether you'll make resolutions, it's whether you'll finally stop running from the parts of yourself that need transformation. Carl Jung once said, "Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate." Think about that for a moment. Everything you've blamed on circumstances, on bad luck, on other people, Jung is telling you it's been you all along. The unconscious parts of yourself, the shadows you refuse to look at, the patterns you won't acknowledge, they've been running the show. And 2026 is coming whether you're ready or not. You know, I've spent decades watching people make the same mistakes year after year. New year, same problems. Different calendar, identical struggles. And it's not because they don't want to change. It's because they're trying to fix the symptoms while ignoring the disease. They're rearranging furniture in a burning house. What I'm going to share with you isn't about surface level improvements. This is about the 10 fundamental areas where transformation must happen if you want 2026 to be anything other than a repeat of every disappointing year before it. Jung understood something most people never grasp. Growth isn't about adding more to your life. It's about integrating what you've rejected. It's about confronting what you've avoided. It's about becoming whole instead of staying comfortable. And that's what these 10 things are really about. They're invitations to become conscious, to stop letting the shadow self sabotage your potential. The first thing you must improve before 2026 is your relationship with your shadow self. Jung taught that the shadow contains everything you've rejected about yourself, the traits you've deemed unacceptable, the desires you've suppressed, the anger you've hidden, the fears you've denied. And here's what most people miss. The shadow doesn't disappear when you ignore it. It grows stronger. It leaks out in passive aggression, in self-sabotage, in patterns you can't seem to break. You've seen this in your own life, haven't you? The things you hate most in other people are often the things you refuse to see in yourself. The colleague who's too aggressive reminds you of the assertiveness you've suppressed. The friend who's too selfish reminds you of the boundaries you're too afraid to set. Jung called this projection, and it's running your life without you even knowing it. Before 2026 arrives, you need to sit down and have an honest conversation with your shadow. What parts of yourself have you rejected? What emotions have you labeled as bad and stuffed down? What aspects of your personality have you hidden because you thought they weren't acceptable? This isn't about becoming someone you're not. This is about reclaiming the energy you've wasted, keeping parts of yourself locked away. The second thing you must improve is your relationship with yourself, not your idea of yourself, not who you pretend to be, your actual self. Jung spoke about the process of individuation, becoming who you truly are instead of who society, your parents, or your culture told you to be. And most people never even start this journey. They spend their entire lives playing a role, wearing a mask Jung called the persona, and wondering why they feel so empty inside. Here's the hard truth. You don't know yourself as well as you think you do. You've spent years building an identity based on what others expect, what feels safe, what won't get you rejected. But that identity is a prison. It's not you, it's a collection of defenses and adaptations. Real self-knowledge requires you to strip away these layers and ask, who am I when nobody's watching? What do I actually want versus what I think I should want? What are my real values versus the values I've inherited? This work is uncomfortable. It means admitting that maybe the career you chose was never really your choice. Maybe the relationships you're in are based on fear of loneliness rather than genuine connection. Maybe the goals you're chasing belong to someone else's dream. But until you face this, you'll keep living someone else's life and calling it yours. The third thing that needs transformation before 2026 is your relationship with failure and imperfection. Jung understood that wholeness includes darkness. Completeness includes flaws. The goal isn't to become perfect, it's to become real. But society has trained you to hide anything that isn't polished, to filter anything that isn't flattering, to pretend you have it all together when you're falling apart inside. This perfectionism is killing you, not dramatically, but slowly, consistently, like poison in small doses. Every time you don't try because you might fail, you die a little. Every time you hide your struggles because you want to appear strong, you disconnect a little more from your authentic self. Every time you reject your humanness in pursuit of some impossible ideal, you move further from wholeness. What if failure wasn't something to avoid, but something to learn from? What if your imperfections weren't flaws to fix, but features that make you human? Jung believed that the goal of life was not perfection, but wholeness. Accepting all of yourself, the light and the dark, the success and the failure, the strength and the weakness. That's what needs to improve. Your capacity to be imperfect and still worthy, to fail and still valuable, to be flawed and still enough. The fourth area demanding transformation is your relationship with your own potential. Here's something Jung observed. Most people are terrified not of their darkness, but of their light. It's not your weakness that scares you most, it's your power. Because if you acknowledge how capable you really are, you can't hide behind excuses anymore. If you admit what you're truly capable of, you become responsible for your life in a way that's absolutely terrifying. You've been playing small, and you know it. You've been dimming your light because it makes other people comfortable. You've been settling for less because trying for more means you might discover you can't have it. But Jung warned that the privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are, and you can't do that while pretending to be less than you are. Before 2026, you need to stop negotiating with your potential. Stop asking permission to be great. Stop waiting for someone to tell you you're ready. Stop making yourself smaller so others feel bigger. Your potential isn't asking for your permission, it's demanding your commitment. And every day you ignore it, you betray yourself in the most fundamental way possible. The fifth thing requiring urgent improvement is your relationship with your emotions. Jung said, emotion is the chief source of all becoming conscious. But you've been taught to suppress emotions, to logic them away, to pretend they don't exist. Men are told not to feel. Women are told not to be angry. Everyone is told to stay positive, to be rational, to control themselves. And in doing so, you've cut yourself off from the very thing that makes consciousness possible. Your emotions aren't problems to solve, they're messengers to listen to. That anxiety you keep pushing down, it's trying to tell you something. That anger you keep swallowing, it has information for you. That sadness you distract yourself from, it's showing you what matters. But instead of listening, you medicate, you scroll, you busy yourself, you do anything to avoid feeling what you're feeling. This avoidance has a cost. Unfelt emotions don't disappear, they go underground. They become chronic tension in your body. They become destructive patterns in your relationships. They become the depression you can't explain or the anxiety that won't go away. Jung knew that what you resist persists, and what you reject becomes your prison. It's time to stop running from your emotional life and start learning from it. The sixth transformation needed before 2026 involves your relationship with others specifically, your need for their approval. Jung spoke about the collective unconscious, the shared patterns and expectations we inherit from culture and society. And one of the most destructive patterns is the belief that your worth comes from external validation. You've become addicted to approval like it's oxygen, and it's suffocating your authentic self. Think about how much energy you waste trying to control what others think of you. How many decisions you make based on what looks good rather than what feels right. How often you betray yourself to avoid disappointing someone else. This need for approval has turned you into a performer, constantly reading the room, adjusting your behavior, shape-shifting to fit whatever you think people want to see. But here's what Jung understood. You can't individuate while seeking constant approval from the collective. You can't become yourself while trying to be everything to everyone. At some point, you have to choose between being liked and being real, between fitting in and standing out, between acceptance and authenticity. And most people never make that choice. They just keep performing until they forget there was ever anything real underneath. The seventh area desperately needing work is your relationship with the unconscious, specifically with dreams, intuition, and the symbolic life. Jung spent his life studying the unconscious, and he discovered that it speaks in symbols, in dreams, in synchronicities. But modern life has taught you to dismiss all of this as nonsense. You've become so rational, so logical, so focused on what you can see and measure that you've cut yourself off from a vast source of wisdom. Your dreams aren't random. Your intuitions aren't foolish. Those strange coincidences aren't meaningless. They're the unconscious trying to communicate with the conscious mind, trying to guide you toward wholeness. But you ignore them. You dismiss them. You explain them away with logic because acknowledging them would mean accepting that there's more to life than what you can control and understand. Before 2026, start paying attention. Keep a dream journal. Notice the patterns. Listen to your gut feelings instead of always overriding them with rationality. Pay attention to what Jung called synchronicity, meaningful coincidences that seem too perfect to be random. The unconscious is trying to help you, but you have to learn its language. You have to develop what Jung called symbolic literacy. The eighth thing that must transform is your relationship with time and mortality. Jung observed that most people live as if they're immortal until suddenly they're not. They postpone their real life, waiting for the perfect moment that never comes. They save their dreams for later, assuming later is guaranteed. They put off important conversations, meaningful experiences, and authentic living because they believe they have endless time. But you don't. You know this intellectually, but you don't live like it's true. You waste time on things that don't matter. You invest energy in things that don't fulfill you. You put off the work of becoming yourself because it seems like there's always tomorrow. But one day there won't be a tomorrow, and you'll realize you spent your whole life preparing to live instead of actually living. Jung spoke about the second half of life as a time for turning inward, for dealing with the spiritual questions that the first half avoided. But most people never make that turn. They just keep chasing the same external goals until they die busier but not deeper, more successful but not more fulfilled. Before 2026, you need to look mortality in the face and let it wake you up. Not to scare you, but to activate you. To make you urgent about what really matters. The ninth transformation involves your relationship with your anima or animus, what Jung described as the unconscious feminine aspect in men and the unconscious masculine aspect in women. These aren't about gender roles, they're about psychological wholeness. The anima represents relatedness, emotion, intuition, receptivity. The animus represents assertion, logic, action, direction. And most people have deeply distorted relationships with these inner figures. Men often suppress their anima, treating emotions as weakness, relationships as secondary, vulnerability as dangerous. They become one-dimensional, all action and no reflection, all doing, and no being. Women often suppress their animus, treating their strength as unfeminine, their ambition as threatening, their assertiveness as wrong. They become accommodating to their own detriment, giving endlessly while never receiving. But Jung taught that wholeness requires integration of both. Men need to develop their capacity for emotional depth, for relationship, for receptivity. Women need to claim their power, their voice, their right to take up space. This isn't about becoming something you're not, it's about developing what's been underdeveloped. It's about balance instead of one-sidedness. The 10th and final thing that must improve before 2026 is your relationship with meaning and purpose. Jung believed that the central neurosis of modern times is meaninglessness. People don't just want to survive, they want their lives to matter. They want to be part of something larger than themselves. But instead of finding real meaning, they fill the void with distractions, addictions, and endless consumption. You've been trying to find meaning in success, in achievements, in accumulation. But none of it fills the void, does it? Because meaning doesn't come from having more, it comes from being more. It doesn't come from external accomplishments, it comes from internal alignment. Jung taught that everyone has a myth they're living, a story they're part of, even if they don't know it. The question is, what's your myth? What story are you living? Most people never ask this question. They just inherit a story from their culture, the story of success, of security, of respectability, and they live it without questioning whether it's really theirs. But that inherited story is why you feel empty even when you have everything you thought you wanted. It's why you feel lost even when you're following the map everyone else follows. Before 2026 arrives, you need to discover your personal myth, not the story you were given, the story that's actually yours. What calls to you? What breaks your heart? What would you do if failure wasn't possible? What would you attempt if you knew you only had a few years left? These questions point toward your real purpose, the meaning that's unique to your life. Now, here's what makes all of this harder. Jung understood that transformation doesn't happen in comfort. The psyche doesn't change because you read about it or think about it. It changes through crisis, through confrontation, through the tension of holding opposites. He called this process enantiodromia, the tendency of things to transform into their opposites when pushed to an extreme. What does this mean practically? It means you won't change these 10 areas by casually thinking about them. You'll change them by pushing yourself into situations that demand change. You want to integrate your shadow? Stop avoiding the people and situations that trigger you. They're showing you what you've rejected. You want to know yourself? Stop filling every moment with distraction and sit with the discomfort of your own company. You want to access your potential? Stop playing safe and do something that scares you. The work Jung described isn't easy. It's not quick. It doesn't come with a 3-step formula or a weekend workshop. It's the work of a lifetime, and most people never even begin it. They stay unconscious, letting patterns they don't understand run their lives, blaming fate for choices they never knew they were making. Don't be most people. Let me tell you what happens when you actually commit to this work. At first, everything gets worse before it gets better. Jung called this the dark night of the soul, the period when your old identity starts crumbling but your new one hasn't formed yet. You're in between worlds. The mask you've worn doesn't fit anymore, but you don't yet know who you are without it. This is terrifying. This is when most people turn back. You'll question everything. The career that felt secure suddenly feels suffocating. The relationships that felt comfortable suddenly feel confining. The beliefs that gave you certainty suddenly feel hollow. And you'll be tempted to retreat, to go back to what you knew, to put the mask back on and pretend this awakening never happened. But Jung understood that once consciousness begins, there's no going back without tremendous psychological cost. Here's what else happens in this in-between stage. You'll lose people. Not everyone can handle your transformation. Some friends will feel threatened by your growth because it highlights their stagnation. Family members will pressure you to go back to being who they're comfortable with. Partners might resist the new version of you because they fell in love with your persona, not your authentic self. This is painful, but Jung would say it's necessary. You can't become yourself while remaining who everyone else needs you to be. But if you push through this difficult middle phase, something remarkable happens. Jung called it the birth of the self, capital S, not the ego self that's obsessed with image and achievement, but the true self that's connected to something deeper. This self doesn't need constant validation because it knows its worth. This self doesn't fear rejection because it's rooted in authenticity. This self doesn't chase meaning because it creates meaning through its very existence. Let me share something Jung discovered through his own psychological crisis. When he was in his late 30s, he went through what he called his confrontation with the unconscious. He had achieved everything society said would make him happy: professional success, recognition, security, but he felt empty. So he did something radical. He stopped running from that emptiness and dove into it. He listened to his dreams. He dialogued with his inner figures. He let the unconscious speak. What he found there changed everything. He discovered that his crisis wasn't a breakdown, it was a breakthrough. The emptiness wasn't depression, it was his psyche demanding that he become who he truly was instead of who he'd been trained to be. This period of darkness became the foundation for all his later work. He learned that psychological suffering isn't the problem, it's the solution trying to happen. This is crucial for you to understand. The discomfort you feel in these 10 areas isn't a sign that something's wrong with you. It's a sign that something's trying to become right. Your shadow isn't emerging to destroy you, it's emerging to be integrated. Your emotions aren't overwhelming you to break you, they're overwhelming you to wake you up. Your crisis of meaning isn't a failure, it's an invitation to discover your real purpose. As 2026 approaches, you have a choice. You can continue down the path you're on, the path of least resistance, of unconsciousness, of repetition, or you can begin the real work of transformation. You can stop running from your shadow and start integrating it. You can stop performing for others and start living for yourself. You can stop avoiding emotions and start learning from them. But let me be clear about something. This isn't about becoming perfect by 2026. This isn't about having it all figured out or completing some transformation checklist. Jung himself said, "I am not what happened to me, I am what I choose to become." The point isn't to arrive somewhere, it's to start the journey. The point isn't to fix everything, it's to become conscious of anything. Every single one of these 10 areas represents a lifelong practice, not a destination. Your relationship with your shadow will need tending for the rest of your life. Your journey toward authentic selfhood never ends. Your integration of anima or animus is ongoing work. But the question is, will you start? Will you begin the work that matters most? Or will you let another year slip by while you stay comfortable in patterns that are slowly killing your soul? Jung observed that the privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are. Not who you should be. Not who others expect you to be. Who you truly are. And becoming that person requires you to improve these 10 fundamental relationships with your shadow, with yourself, with imperfection, with potential, with emotion, with approval, with the unconscious, with mortality, with wholeness, and with meaning. Here's what I know from decades of watching people. Those who do this work transform their entire lives. Not because their circumstances magically change, but because they change. They stop being victims of unconscious patterns and become conscious creators of their experience. They stop living someone else's life and start living their own. They stop seeking meaning in external accomplishments and find it in internal alignment. And here's what else I know. You already know if you need to do this work. Something in you has been screaming for attention, begging to be acknowledged, demanding to be integrated. You've been ignoring it, suppressing it, explaining it away, but it's still there. It will always be there until you face it. Jung taught that what we don't confront consciously will meet us in life as fate. The shadow you ignore will sabotage your relationships. The potential you suppress will haunt you with regret. The emotions you avoid will become symptoms you can't explain. The meaning you don't pursue will leave you empty no matter how much you achieve. This isn't metaphor. This is how the psyche works. So before 2026 arrives, before another year passes in unconsciousness, I'm asking you to choose differently. Choose awareness over comfort. Choose growth over safety. Choose becoming over belonging. Choose your authentic self over your acceptable self. This choice isn't made once, it's made every single day, in every single moment, in every single decision. Start small if you need to, but start. Spend 10 minutes journaling about your shadow, what traits in others trigger you and why. Spend 10 minutes in silence without distraction, what comes up when you're alone with yourself. Spend 10 minutes feeling an emotion instead of avoiding it, what is it trying to tell you? These small practices create consciousness, and consciousness creates choice, and choice creates transformation. The collective pressure will tell you to focus on external goals, make more money, lose more weight, achieve more success. But Jung would tell you that none of that matters if you're not also doing the inner work. External accomplishments without internal development just create a more successful version of your unconscious self. You can climb the ladder of success only to realize it's leaning against the wrong wall. And here's something most people don't realize. Jung taught that the first half of life is naturally about external achievement. You're supposed to build an ego, establish yourself, create security. That's not wrong, it's necessary. But somewhere, around midlife, the psyche demands a shift. It stops caring about more success and starts asking about meaning. It stops being satisfied with achievement and starts craving authenticity. Many people experience this as a crisis. But Jung saw it as an opportunity, the call to the second half of life, where the real work begins. If you're feeling restless in your success, if achievement feels empty, if you've checked all the boxes but still feel incomplete, this isn't failure. This is your psyche telling you it's time for the deeper work. It's time to stop building the external life and start discovering the internal one. This is exactly what these 10 areas are addressing. Let me tell you about resistance because you're going to feel it the moment you commit to this work. Jung understood that the psyche resists change not because it's lazy, but because it's protective. Your patterns, even the destructive ones, served a purpose once. They kept you safe, helped you survive, protected you from pain, and part of you still believes you need them. So when you try to integrate your shadow, your ego will scream that it's dangerous. When you try to be authentic, your persona will insist that you need the mask to be accepted. When you try to feel your emotions, your defenses will kick in with distraction and numbness. This resistance isn't your enemy, it's information. It's showing you exactly where the work needs to happen. The key is to approach this resistance with what Jung called active imagination, a way of dialoguing with the resistant parts instead of fighting them. When you feel fear about claiming your potential, don't just push through it. Ask it, what are you afraid of? When you feel shame about your shadow traits, don't just suppress them. Ask, what are you trying to protect me from? This kind of internal dialogue creates integration instead of internal warfare. Here's what I've learned watching people do this work over decades. The ones who succeed are the ones who treat it like a practice, not a project. They don't approach transformation like a problem to solve with a beginning, middle, and end. They approach it like learning a musical instrument, something that requires daily attention, patience with mistakes, and a lifetime of deepening skill. This means creating rituals that support consciousness. Maybe it's morning journaling where you track your dreams and explore your inner life. Maybe it's weekly therapy where you do the deep work with professional guidance. Maybe it's monthly solitude where you disconnect from the noise and reconnect with yourself. Maybe it's daily meditation where you practice being with whatever arises without judgment or distraction. These aren't optional extras for people with time to spare. These are essential practices for people serious about transformation. Jung himself spent hours every day in active imagination, stone carving, and self-analysis. He understood that consciousness doesn't maintain itself, it requires deliberate cultivation. The moment you stop tending it, the unconscious takes over again and you slip back into old patterns. What I'm offering you isn't a path to easy happiness or quick fixes. I'm offering you the path to wholeness, to authenticity, to becoming fully human. Jung called this individuation the process of becoming who you were always meant to be. And it's the most challenging, most rewarding work you'll ever do. Think about your life right now. Really think about it. Are you living authentically or performing? Are you pursuing your meaning or someone else's? Are you growing toward wholeness or fragmenting into pieces? Are you conscious or on autopilot? Be brutally honest. The answers to these questions will tell you whether you're ready for what 2026 requires. Because here's what's coming. The world is changing faster than ever. The old structures that gave people identity and meaning are crumbling. The collective myths that society offered are losing their power. This means two things. It means crisis for those who haven't done their inner work, and it means opportunity for those who have. Which one will it be for you? Jung predicted that modern humanity would face a crisis of meaning, a collapse of the old containers that held psychological life together. We're living in that crisis right now. The only way through it is the way Jung described individuation, consciousness, integration, wholeness. You can't escape this crisis by achieving more or accumulating more or staying busier. You can only move through it by going within. So here's my challenge to you. Pick one of these 10 areas, just one. The one that stirred something in you as you've been listening. The one that made you uncomfortable because it's too close to home. The one you want to dismiss because facing it feels too hard. That's the one. That's where your work begins. Maybe it's your shadow, those parts of yourself you've rejected and need to reclaim. Maybe it's your relationship with yourself, the authentic self you've buried under layers of performance. Maybe it's your emotions, the feelings you've been running from for decades. Maybe it's your potential, the greatness you've been too scared to claim. Maybe it's meaning, the purpose you've been too distracted to discover. Whatever it is, commit to it before 2026. Not as a resolution that fades by February, but as a practice that becomes part of who you are. Read Jung if you need to read Man and His Symbols, or Memories, Dreams, Reflections. Find a therapist who understands depth psychology. Join a group that does real inner work. Keep a journal. Pay attention to your dreams. Do something that makes this transformation real and not just another idea you're collecting. The truth is, most people won't do this. They'll hear these words and nod along and do absolutely nothing. They'll go back to their lives exactly as they were, hoping somehow things will be different. But Jung was clear. Nothing changes until consciousness changes. You can't think your way into a new life. You have to become your way into it. The graveyard I mentioned at the beginning, it's full of people who knew better but never did better. People who understood these concepts intellectually but never embodied them. People who talked about transformation but never transformed. People who reached the end of their lives and realized they'd never really lived. Don't let that be you. You have time before 2026, but not unlimited time. You have the capacity for this work, but not without effort. You have the potential for transformation, but not without consciousness. The question isn't whether you can change these 10 areas, it's whether you will. And that answer will determine everything about who you become. Jung's final gift to us was this insight. Life doesn't get easier, but you can become stronger. Circumstances don't become more favorable, but you can become more conscious. The world doesn't stop demanding things from you, but you can stop living unconsciously and start living deliberately. These 10 things, your shadow, yourself, your imperfection, your potential, your emotions, your need for approval, your unconscious life, your mortality, your wholeness, your meaning, they're not separate issues. They're all aspects of one fundamental question. Will you wake up? Will you become conscious? Will you stop living the life you were given and start living the life that's actually yours? That's the real work before 2026. Not a better version of who you've been, but an authentic version of who you are. Not more success in living someone else's dream, but the courage to live your own. Not perfection, but wholeness. Not comfort, but consciousness. You stand at the threshold. Behind you is the graveyard of dead dreams, the life of unconsciousness, the comfortable prison of patterns you've always known. Ahead of you is the unknown territory of your authentic self, the challenging journey of individuation, the uncomfortable truth of who you really are. Jung gave us the map, but the journey, that belongs to you alone. And 2026 is coming, whether you're ready or not. So here's the only question that matters. Will you finally become who you were always meant to be?